What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Defer It to the Game podcast. Hope everyone is having a great evening. It's about 9 o'clock Eastern down here in southern Florida. Hope everyone's doing okay across the rest of the South. I know there's been a lot of crazy weather. I saw a dude out in Louisiana using his fan boat to get around in the snow that they got in southern Louisiana. So I hope everyone is being as creative as that guy. Speaking of creativity, today we're talking about MLB uniforms. So it's kind of a slow day in the free agency cycle right now. There weren't any major trades. There weren't any real big offseason moves. And so, I'm kind of a uniform geek myself, and there are some teams that I think could do a lot of really cool things with their uniforms in MLB. And, before we get into the actual teams, I got 5 that I think would benefit from it from kind of a design standpoint as well as a just general, the vibes standpoint. I kind of want to go over the 3 reasons why teams do change their uniforms, outside of some extenuating circumstances regarding teams in Cleveland and Washington, D.C. But for the most part, it really comes down to 3 things. So the first one is to signal a new era. So best example in Major League Baseball recently is the San Diego Padres. They had kind of a navy and khaki theme going for a long time, and now they've kind of switched back to a modern remix on the classic brown and yellow colors that we all remember guys like Dave Winfield and Tony Gwynn wearing. The other one is just to kind of move on from a tired uniform set. So if you think about, say, the Milwaukee Brewers, they had kind of a navy and gold theme going on right now. They ended up switching to a really fun kind of navy, brighter yellow theme with some light blue accents fitting in, just to kind of refresh the look, kind of call back to some aspects of their uniforms that were really good, and kind of really flesh out some of those details. And the third thing is to develop a better connection with the fans. So a good example of this would be the Seattle Mariners. The Seattle Mariners have had a ton of really fun uniforms incorporating some old baseball teams in Seattle, some of the other looks that the Mariners have trotted out in the years, as well as some fun remixes on the original franchise, the Seattle Pilots, that were moved away from Seattle after only a year. And so, these are the 3 kind of major reasons why teams change their uniforms, and some work out better than others, but these 3 reasons are kind of at the core of every change. And the first team I want to jump into is the team in our nation's capital, the Washington Nationals. The emphasis is go outside the box. It's a new era. There are new stars. Juan Soto is gone. Max Scherzer's gone. Bryce Harper's been gone for a while. They're kind of out of their original kind of post-relocation from Montreal era. And so, we have this classic look. It's been remixed a couple times. Some fonts have changed, but the general essence, the curly W, the national script across the chest, the red, white, and blue, it's all been very, very consistent over the years with Washington. But I think there are some interesting concepts that they can go with. I think, with C.J. Abrams, James Wood, a couple really good prospects coming up, it might be time to signal that there's a bit of a changing of the guard. And last year, I thought they did a great job with that. They brought out this City Connect uniform that emphasized the cherry trees in Washington, D.C., really one of the most iconic parts of Washington, D.C. that if anyone goes, that's one of the first things they notice, especially along the pond near the Jefferson Memorial. It's really one of the more unique color schemes in MLB. I don't think anyone's ever trotted out kind of a slate gray and rose or pink color combination before. I'm sure there are some teams way back in the 1910s that tried that, but this is a kind of cool and unique thing. It's old hat for a lot of teams in Washington, D.C. to wear red, white, and blue, being in the nation's capital. But if you look at the Commanders, for example, D.C. United, they all bear some resemblance. They all have some form of red in them, but they're not so tied to that red, white, and blue color scheme. And, if that connects with the DC fans, which I think it did, it was very well received by fans inside and outside of the Beltway. I think this would be an interesting direction to go down. I don't think that they will make a full pivot to gray and pink, but maybe there are accents that they can take away from this. Maybe they can add some type of peach blossom sleeve patch. Maybe they can add it to the side of a cap. Or maybe they can just keep it as a permanent alternate uniform. There's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of great alternate uniforms that teams keep around and fans like, but they never become full-time uniforms. And I think that's fine. The next team, I want to emphasize, they need to get away from their current era because it is one of the more sad periods in their franchise's history, and it's the Los Angeles Angels. It is time to end their flop era. So these uniforms that we see Mike Trout wearing here, they started off very strong with the early 2000s Los Angeles Angels, with K-Rod, Tim Salmon, a bunch of really good players that made the World Series and won in 2002 against a great San Francisco Giants team led by Barry Bonds. And, these uniforms serve their purpose. They fit that 2000s mold very, very well. That font is almost indistinguishable from the Texas Rangers font that they adopted at the exact same time, basically. And it makes sense for the time, but considering how the later era of this uniform has gone, people are definitely going to associate this with the failures to build around Mike Trout, the disastrous signings of Albert Pujols and Anthony Rendon, and just some of the darker years in that franchise's history. And I don't think they have to look far for inspiration. I think if you wanted to go with kind of a Cali theme, they are Orange County. That City Connect uniform is great, but I don't think anyone in baseball or just as a general fan would be mad if they went back to that classic halo design. The California Angels of their first 20 or so years. I think those are always well received when they come back to the diamond. And, maybe it can be kind of we are refinding our heritage. The Angels have a lot of really, really good players over their years, whether it was Reggie Jackson or Nolan Ryan. There is a history to call back to. And maybe they just need to flush this era of Angels baseball out of them. The next team is so obvious. The Miami Marlins need to do something. Return to winning ways and return to winning attire. The Marlins are currently rocking this kind of electric blue and salmon pink set, which in concept sounds great. And they've incorporated some of the better aspects of the Giancarlo era Marlins, as well as the previous set that we'll get back to here in just a minute. But I think it's so dominated by the color black. It's so dominated by gray, and it looks very washed out when it's a white home uniform. And it just, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to execute on this concept. And it seems like they're doing a lot of hard work to make fetch happen with these uniforms, when the best possible uniform, in my opinion, top 2 baseball uniform of all time, sitting right there, the teal with the Florida Marlins look. If they wanted to still keep the name as the Miami Marlins, but adopt this set again, I don't think anyone would be mad. But I think so many people remember that era of Marlins winning baseball. Whether it was playing in Joe Robbie Stadium, dealing with some of the fire sales, but that team won in teal and black. And, it still is very Miami, very loud. It's clear with this current uniform set that the ownership wants to represent Miami well and represent how colorful and how vibrant the city is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the teal and black set just does such a good job of that it seems like they're trying to work too hard to create a concept that they already perfected all the way back in the 90s when they started out. And our next team, we're just going across the state. We're going to the Gulf Coast this time. We're talking about the Tampa Bay Rays. And, they're moving on from the Trop, but they need to bring their best. The Trop is very much in flux right now after Hurricane Helene and Milton. There was a lot of damage done to the building. The Rays are going to be playing in George Steinbrenner Field in downtown Tampa, the single-A home of the New York Yankees in their spring training home. But, this current set, they've been rocking since the mid-2000s. It brought a lot of success. Really, the first ever success for the Tampa Bay Rays was in this Columbia blue, navy blue, and yellow set, where they really started to emphasize the ray of sun more than an actual devil ray, the original name of the team. And, if we're going to a new stadium, potentially, and we're kind of refreshing out of the concrete caverns of Tropicana Field, potentially to a retractable roof site, potentially something that brings in a lot more sun than the original, or at least this kind of 2020s retake on the originals, with the gradient colors going across the jersey in actual devil ray as the mascot. I think that would be a perfect way to kind of synchronize things and kind of harken back to an original great design. And let's face it, the Devil Rays of the 2020s and late 2010s are a baseball team so good at developing prospects and churning out great major league players. The late 90s Rays and the early 2000s Rays could not imagine this. They really struggled in these uniforms, but I think there's been enough time for that uniform to rest on the shelf and gain some popularity again as a throwback uniform that I think it's just a no-brainer and it's a layup. This is definitely a kind of reconnect with the fans uniform. I think the Rays have done a pretty poor job in Tropicana Field of getting people to come out to the ballpark. Payroll has a factor in that. Kind of shipping out stars has a factor in that. But at the same time, they've always had a great product on the field ever since really Evan Longoria came to the Rays. And so, if they're playing this good, imagine the kind of cultural aspect that bringing back such good uniforms would bring, because you're on the Gulf Coast of Florida. You were on one of the sunniest coasts in the country with some of the best weather in the country, and I don't think that navy blue demonstrates that well enough. It's Florida. Everyone in the country knows that this place is loud in its people, in its design, and just how it carries itself. So I think the Rays should just lean into it, much like the Miami Marlins before. Like, this is not a place for kind of normal staid design. That can stay in Yankee Stadium. That can stay at Wrigley Field. Florida is a state of upstarts. And these teams both started in the 1990s, and I think they nailed the ethos of their team when they first came out. And the last team, I think it's the most important team that might need a bit of a refresh, because it's the dawn of a new era. The Cincinnati Reds. This team is more fun than the Cincinnati Reds have been in such a long time. The Cincinnati Reds were very good when they had Joey Votto and they had Johnny Cueto. They made some playoff runs, but I don't think we've seen anything quite like the juice we've seen around the Cincinnati Reds that we've seen until Ellie De La Cruz showed up, until a couple of these major moves that the Reds have made, until Tito Francona came over to manage the Reds. This is a perfect time. I don't know if going to the City Connect full-time makes sense. This is a very classic team. It's the oldest professional continuous baseball team in America. They have a design. They have a logo. I don't think any of it's bad. I think they need to start to bring in some of those elements that they had with the City Connect, with this younger roster, with this younger team, that America's really starting to take notice. The Reds have flown under the radar for a long, long time in Major League Baseball, and it makes sense for a new design to arrive at the same time the roster does. this has happened a lot. If you look at a team with similar colors, the Atlanta Falcons in the 1990s rolled out for the first time an all-black set for the Dirty Bird Falcons. That's when Deion Sanders was coming out. Bad Moon Andre Rison was coming out. This was a fun, exciting team in Atlanta, and the black uniforms for the Falcons totally got what the team was about, and it connected with the fans. It connected with the team, and it kind of fed into an internal swagger. And I think, as small as it is, a update to the Reds in some way, shape, or form would just add fuel to the fire that this team has gone. Because if you watch Reds baseball, it is not your grandfather's baseball. It is fast, it is loud, it is exciting. They play in a great stadium in Great American Ballpark. The ball flies there. This is going to be a fun team to watch. And so if I were the Cincinnati Reds, I would look at retouching, refreshing, or taking another look at the current uniform set, because it's very classic, it's very storied in its history, but that's not the team you have right now. You have young, you have exciting. It's something the Reds haven't had in such a long time. And so, if they wanted to kind of mark the Ellie era, they should look into switching to something new, or at least adding something new to their rotation, because they nailed it with this City Connect uniform. I think fans in Cincinnati and fans all over Major League Baseball really liked it. The response was really positive. All black uniforms, and some of these City Connect uniforms have been really rough in their application. I'm looking at you, Tampa Bay. I'm looking at you, Detroit. Some of these City Connect uniforms have just been not very good. Philly, that one was truly atrocious. But they nailed it with this one. It was simple, but the colors were loud, and black and red, it's a fierce color. They really should lean into something like that. So I think this is perfect for that dawn of a new era. This is a team that really has a chance to do something special, and if they were able to commemorate it with a new uniform, I think that'd be great. So, I want to hear from you guys. What teams do you think need a refresh? What teams on my list do you think we should just not touch? Should we not touch the Cincinnati Reds? Does the Tampa Bay Rays set make more sense to you now? Do you not like the Devil Rays? I think some people back in the day were kind of freaked out by the fact that it was a Devil Ray rather than just a Ray. But, what teams need a refresh? I gave some thoughts to the Mariners. I gave some thoughts to the Rockies. Those are teams that might need a bit of a refresh to kind of get transition to, say, Julio Rodriguez era, or the Rockies just needing to flush everything out like the Angels. So, love to hear your thoughts. Appreciate you guys listening, and have a great night.